Welcome to the vault. DNA and videos everywhere. Idaho killer will be caught, says the father of Maddie Mogen. This commentary is pertaining to his opinion, the case. I'll also bring you information pertaining to how this killer will be caught, and will this killer be caught by Moscow Police Department, FBI, state police, and with the help of the general public. And I also will be playing content pertaining to the chief wanting people to not revel in gossip, he said, she said, and speculations pertaining to the case and those who are alleged suspects. Thank you for joining me. Law and Crime Network, source number one.
The people working on trying to figure this out, and really means a lot.
A father of one of the victims speaks out. A former tenant talks about the crime scene, and online sleuths target an ex-boyfriend. We delve into the latest into the University of Idaho murder investigation with legendary former homicide detective Phil Waters. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Another week, another day, and still no arrests, no publicly identifiable suspect, and no recovered murder weapon in the University of Idaho quadruple murder case. This is the killings of 21-year-old Kaylee Gonsalves, 21-year-old Madison Mogen, 20-year-old Zana Kernodle, and 20-year-old Ethan Chapin. Their bodies were found in their rental home on November 13th, and there's still so many questions that we have. Now, while we don't know what is happening behind the scenes with law enforcement and investigators, what we can discuss is what's happening publicly, because we do have some updates to go through. And to help me talk through this and get the latest in the investigation about where we're at, I'm joined once again by Phil Waters, who has been with us the last few weeks to go over this case. Phil is a former legendary homicide detective who has worked over 400 cases, and he is an expert interrogator. Phil, it's great to have you once again back here on Sidebar.
Good morning, Jesse. I appreciate y'all having me back.
Yeah, of course. And I want to start with right now, Ben Mogen. So Ben Mogen is the father of Madison Mogen. I don't believe he's spoken out previously. I could be mistaken, but this is significant what he said. He spoke to a local media outlet, and he said, while there are still so many questions that haven't been answered in this case, he believes the killer or killers will be caught. So this is kind of a different sense of what we've been seeing online and from the community, where there's this seeming lack of trust in law enforcement. He has said, quote, "From the very beginning, I've known that."
Brief intermission. Thank you for joining me.
He has said, quote, "From the very beginning, I've known that people don't get away with these things these days. There's too many things that you can get caught up on, like DNA and videos everywhere. This isn't something that people get away with. That goes unsolved." He also said, that how state investigators have been getting kind of outside help from the FBI. And he said that with these resources, they should be able to solve the case. He said, quote, "I have to just know that they know what they're doing. And if they don't, then they're going to know someone that does." What do you make of his statements? Do you agree with him?
Well, to a degree, I do. And I'm, of course, heartfelt prayers have been going up for him and the other family members of these young people that the tragic event. I do agree with him in the sense that there are a lot of resources now today from a technological standpoint that has brought the conclusion to cases brought about in a more timely way. Now, I use that word timely loosely because it may take the timely manner in this particular case. It may be 2 months, it may be 2 years, and it could go on from there. But the statement that he makes about people just don't get away with this kind of thing in today's world, that is true to a degree. But again, this is what it comes down to, is just be good old-fashioned detective work that gets this thing solved. And that's just hitting the bricks, getting out there, talking to people, processing the evidence that's been collected, and then seeing where that evidence leads. So I think there's a better chance that something like this, especially the scope of this particular crime, will be will be resolved.
Yeah, and we know that the chief of police has come out and basically tried to reassure the public that we got this under control. We're in charge of this. We know what's happening.
So I know there's been some questions about the leadership in this investigation. What I want people to know is this is a Moscow Police Department investigation. We're utilizing the resources of the FBI and state police, but we pick the investigators. My command team oversees this. We have 94 years of experience between us.
We do have outside help, but there's so much we don't know behind the scenes. I feel the reason, or one of the reasons he came out, Mr. Mogen, is because maybe there's something happening online. Obviously, people have shown an intense interest in this case. He said, quote, "I can get all my news about it right from there, and I don't have to try and judge through all the misinformation." The reason I say this is because people online it seems to me, are having such a need to try to find the killer that they're looking at all the places that either police have already looked or police have said that is just a red herring. And the reason I bring this up is there's a young man named Jack DeCore. Hopefully I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. He's the ex-boyfriend of Kaylee Gonsalves. He dated her for 5 years. They broke up 3 weeks before the murder. He was looked into by police. He was cleared as a suspect, and even Kaylee's family has said he is not involved in this, but internet sleuths do not agree. According to his aunt, who's spoken out, she says the internet has come after him. They think he's the killer. It's been tough on him. So it seems to me Mr. Mogen coming out and saying, leave it to the police, is a way to kind of, temper the flames that we're seeing online. And I'm curious that that's putting pressure on police right now to solve this quickly so that the wrong people aren't targeted.
Well, I don't think there's any more pressure on law enforcement than what is already there and what is already self-imposed. Look, I know that when I worked cases in Houston, especially when it was a multiple fatality case like this one, and you have to go to the family and speak to them about this, and you have to have empathy, you have to have compassion for those folks in the discussion of the scene itself, because you want to be honest with the family about what is going on, and I think that's what's happening here. I don't think the chief, the optics of this thing when it first got started, horrible, only because this was so out of the realm of what the chief had experienced in his career, especially in this community. But now it would appear to me that they have this communication better on track. And I think that when they, at the very beginning of this thing, the Moscow PD realized they were really in over their head in terms of investigative experience. And they reached out to the state and the FBI. I've said this before. It's not like Die Hard, gentlemen, I give you the FBI. That's just not the way this works. So they had the foresight and the wisdom to do this. So now they have these resources are marshaled to come up with, hopefully, finding the right person who's done this wrong thing. But in regards to the boyfriend, go ahead, Jesse, do you want to?
No, I was going to say, regarding the boyfriend, how can we be sure he was properly ruled out? And I understand why people are going after him. When you talk about stabbing, it seems like a kind of a personal, intimate event. So you would look at somebody who maybe had something personal against Kaylee. How can we quiet any of the online speculation against the boyfriend? Can we trust law enforcement? They properly ruled him out.
Well, that's just going to have to happen. But the problem is with what has happened with the boyfriend and this online stuff. This is the bad part about the online generated theories and so forth and so on regarding anything for that matter. But in this particular case, people hide behind their names, their Twitter names, whatever, and they just put this stuff out. I don't think this bell is ever going to be unrung regarding the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend. That genie's out of the bottle, and people are going to continue to do what they do because that's the nature of people. In terms of him being ruled out, the first thing I would have done, and I'm sure this is one of the first things they did in this investigation, is you start working this thing from the inside out, and you're going to start at the most personal relationships with those 4 victims, all of them, not just Kaylee. You're going to all of them.
Exactly.
And in this particular case, Kaylee has an ex-boyfriend that she had just broken up with. Well, certainly that's somebody that the detectives are going to look at right off the bat. They're going to bring him in. They're going to interview him. And they're going to find out where he was when this happened. So if that's been verified, if nothing can put him at that scene, then that's it. He's ruled out. Now, that doesn't mean that if something does come up in a piece of evidence that...
Brief intermission. Thank you for joining me.
That would cause them to have to go revisit him and talk to him about explaining why we find this there at the scene, then they'll do that. But I mean, in terms of this young man, he's just being raked over the coals unmercifully, and it's improper.
Well, again, the hope is that they're looking at everybody and everything. Two of the people that were ruled out very early in this case were the two surviving roommates. We've talked about this before on Sidebar, that the victims were found on the second and third floors, but there were two surviving roommates who apparently might have slept through everything. They were on the ground floor. They were not harmed in any way. Here's what's interesting. It's come out that a former tenant of that house, somebody who had graduated, I think, in 2022, earlier, he said the house is a creaky house, and his name is Cole Altanade. And he said that he told ABC News that you could typically hear every movement inside the home. It's, quote, it's definitely an old creaky house. You can't walk up any of the stairs or any of the floors without everybody in the house knowing it. He also talked about how kind of being a party house, and people knew about it. And there are people who are very familiar with the house since people were coming in and out. So now we're wondering two things. Is it A, the killer somebody who had been to that house previously? Right, if you take him at his word, somebody who maybe was familiar with the layout of that house. And B, again, there's a lot of questions about the two surviving roommates. How could they not have heard anything? And I know that there was a 911 phone call placed the next day where they talked about, I believe it was an unconscious person. They had called the friends to the house first before they made the 911 phone call. But again, we haven't heard the 911 phone call. We don't know the contents of it. Pure speculation at this point. But hearing how the house was in a state where it'd be very difficult to not hear something, what's your take on it?
Well, I've also read where there was a person who had formerly lived in the house that said that he roomed on the first floor and he couldn't hear anything going on the second, third floor. I don't know what this other person's definition of an old creaky house is, but that doesn't look to me to be an old creaky house. Certainly there's going to be creaks and so forth and so on. It's made out of wood, sticks, and bricks. So this is another person giving some information that really, it doesn't make any difference. It's just something that they want to, for whatever reason, want to interject themselves into this thing. They want to make a comment about it in regards to, and I've heard some well-known folks on the interwebs talking about how could they not hear this? How could they not hear this going? These two roommates on the first floor. How could they not have heard this? How do we explain that? And that, to me, that is just sensationalism for its sake. And there is a completely logical reason why they didn't hear it. Number one, they were asleep. They may have been passed out. And I'm not suggesting that they were. I'm just saying that because it may have been that case. And this is a silent killer moving through the house that what looks to me from the outside looking in appears that they knew where they were going to. And you have to remember that Ethan and Zana were on the second floor. And they were presumably, I would imagine the blood trail would be able to tell who was killed first. I'm just assuming that they were when this person, if Kaylee was the one they were after, and that's an if, then they realized that this was not Kaylee, and they went up and found her and then did what they did to Kaylee and Madison. So the use of a bladed weapon, that's a silent killer, and this person apparently is efficient with the use of that weapon, so they could go in, do what they needed to do, make very little noise, and nobody would have heard anything happen.
So, Phil, before I sign you off, we have about 30 seconds. I want to ask you real quick. Is this case unique or bizarre in any way, or is this just standard from what you've seen in your experience? The only reason we're looking at it is because there's so much attention onto it, but is there anything unique or bizarre about it?
I think the only thing that is unique about it is where it took place, in Moscow, Idaho, at the University of Idaho. That, to me, is the uniqueness of this case because of that community, because of I've said it before, in the last 15 years, they've had 7 homicides, and all of a sudden they have 4 in one day. So that's the only part of this that I would find unique. I mean, in terms of working the scene and the crime itself, there's evil in the world, and unfortunately it landed in Moscow, Idaho on that day.
And we're going to continue to follow it. Phil Waters, thank you so much for breaking down these new updates for us. We appreciate you taking the time as always.
Thank you, Jesse.
And that's all we have for you, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sidebar. Please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Law and Crime Network is the source. Maddie Mogen, father, has spoken to the news to say he is confident that the killer will be caught from videos and evidence. And I'm glad that he spoke out, and I'm glad that he is positive, because what would it look like, the father of a victim not being positive that the crime would be solved? Crimes, plural. 4 people died. 4 people were bludgeoned to death. Yes, Mr. Jack DeCour and so many other people have been named as suspects by social media persons, but in the end, their opinions don't matter, because we do not know Jack. We do not know the hoodie guy. We do not know any of their friends or associates. We do not even know the victims. And as I've always said, until you know the victims, you will not know who the suspect is or are. The chief has spoken that he and his officials working the police department have 94 years of experience between themselves. He chooses who works what case, the lead, so on and so forth. So therefore, he's confident about the investigation. He was not honorary. He sought out help day 1, day 2 from the FBI and law officials. So no one can ever say that he had a big head and wanted to work this case alone with a staff of 36 persons. He did seek out help very early on. Were mistakes made? Possibly. We will never know. But the point is, the FBI and state police are there. We now have 60 agents on deck of this case. I say we. They have 60 agents now. So that means they are diligent in solving this crime. That's a lot of people from around the United States working this case, not just in Moscow, but around the country. That has been said. State police working in the city to help work with the campus to secure the students' safety, faculty and staff, visitors, townspeople. A new structure also implemented for spring for security for the staff and students. But you have to be positive, because being negative is not helpful in a case where anyone is hurt. And yes, there are nasty rumors circulating about different people. And as you hear, this gentleman talks about people inserting themselves, talking about the house creaking, not creaking. One person speaks about not hearing noise on the 3rd floor. Then you have another person now coming forward saying you can hear everything through the house. I guess it depends on your interpretation of what you deem as noise. What's noisy to you may not be noisy to me. Some people can live in apartments and houses and live with noise. Some cannot. So if I am the type of person that don't like noise, then the house may be deemed noisy to me. Now, the flip side is somebody else could live in the same house and they wouldn't consider whatever noise level to be noisy. It depends on your interpretation of noise. Are these people coming out speaking in this case, wanting to be relevant, 5 minutes of fame? Possibly. Because once a person gives their government name, that means they don't have any problem with people knowing who they are and also mocking whatever that they're saying or being in disagreement of what they're saying. Were these people sleep in the house? I don't know. But we've heard many times things have gone bump in the night and people have asked you, did you hear the sirens? Did you hear somebody arguing? Did you hear the rain, the storm? And you may say, no, I did not. So one could say, well, then you can't judge these people for not hearing anything that night, allegedly. whether you live in a house or apartment building. And yes, crime happens everywhere. And I'm glad he said that. This is bizarre to certain people. But if you are not privy to crime, you don't live in a place where there is a lot of crime, whether it be stabbings or shootings, it would seem bizarre. It's bizarre to the people there, I'm sure, because they don't have crime every day that's violent. But it's not to say that they don't have violent people living in Moscow, Idaho. I'm sure they do. They just have not made the news. They have not been arrested. And that's what happened here. Somebody was walking around with a violent temperament. And on this fateful morning, they acted out against 4 persons. But they were always there, walking amongst everybody, hiding in plain sight, and nobody knew that they were going to pop off. So that's the point of the content I brought you earlier this morning pertaining to the dirty secrets of Moscow, Idaho. They've had violent people living there. And I brought you damn near 40 years of content pertaining to violence there. Someone shooting up people, a man, an ex-professor killing a student outside her home. A woman killed at a trailer. Those are all real. Right there in Moscow, Idaho. Are they closing in on a suspect? What evidence do they have back from the lab? Do they have male DNA mixed in with any of the blood found at the scene of the crime? Any type of bodily fluids that are of a male? Anything left behind, fibers, hair, broken fingernails from the victims and or the perpetrator? One thing I thought about yesterday and now today in looking at footage of the house, I want you to visualize the house for just a second. And I want you to think about where everybody lived in the house. The 2 girls living on the bottom, it would make sense for them to enter through the front door. But Xana and the other 2 girls lived 2nd, 3rd floor. Is it possible that when the girls came home, parked their car, or dropped off by rideshare, that they entered from the back? Because wouldn't it be easier to enter from the back instead of going through the front and climb up all the stairs? They woke. Just a thought. That maybe the girls never entered the front door when they came in from, work, school, whatever. That they walked around the back of the house and entered through the glass door. Now, bear with me here. They enter through the back as their entry every day. Now imagine going through the back, 2nd floor, the 2 girls who lived on top, Xana living on the 2nd floor. Let's say they use that back entry every day to go and come out. Imagine never locking that glass door. Because you have to ask yourself, is it even possible to lock the door from outside? I've not heard one commentator or news person ask this question. Because as I tell you, the queen stays woke. I watch everything and I listen. That's something many people won't do with true crime. And that's been said. Many people just like to talk and want to be right. But they don't assess the information that's been given to them. So I'm going to ask, can you lock that glass door, 2nd level and 3rd, from the outside? Because we know that we live in a world where people are lazy and don't like to walk. So were these girls lazy and decided they will not use the front entry? Because what's the point? I don't live downstairs. I would only need it if I'm going to wash my clothes and I'm already inside of the house. It's something that I was thinking about watching the footage of the house. Something said, you need to really think about this. Maybe the girls use the back entrance to go in the house every day. So where I'm taking this is, if you are going into a glass slider 2nd level and it does not lock from the outside, stay woke, then that means perhaps the girls left the door purposely unlocked. to get in as not to have to use the front entry. Number one. Number two, when going into this entry, if someone is watching them, they will now know or knew at that time that the girls left the door unlocked. This is just hypothetical because something was hitting me about the way the house is made. And something said, who's to say that they ever entered the front door to go into the house, the people living on the second and the third floor? Exactly. Sliders usually lock from the inside. Exactly. Thank you. So this is a great question to keep me from having to climb up all those stairs, especially if a person lives on the third floor. I could see a person living on the third floor coming down the stairs and entering out of that kitchen slider on the second floor as their exit. And then they walk around the house and then walk to the front of the house to get in their car or walk to school or wherever they wanted to go by foot or car. And many people do use a different exit in their homes. I've been to many people's homes who will tell you, we don't use this door to enter in. Come through this door. And I know a family specifically that had a door facing the street. You pulled up in the driveway. We never walked into that front door. We walked through the carport and entered the house from the kitchen door, which is only a few feet away from the front door, but that is how we entered. Always through that carport door, which led straight to the kitchen and the dining area. So that was just a question. Did the girls who lived on the second and the third floor use the second floor slider as their entry point every day in and out of the house? And if indeed you can't lock it from the outside, that means they would be leaving that unlocked in hopes that no one would ever enter through there, break in, so on and so forth. So just imagine if, hypothetically, what I'm saying is the truth, that they use the second slider as their entry and exit every day. Somebody possibly knew they did not lock the door or could not lock the door from outside. And if they were watching, a voyeur, as I've brought you content in a previous video, he, she, or they would know this because all they had to do was watch you go in and out and realize you just came out, slid the door, and walked away. You did not stand there and fumble with a lock. You see, there are always people watching. This is what I try to explain to people. There's always somebody watching. This is how people know how to infiltrate your house and when to come to your house, when to break in your house. It's because they were watching. Now, it is not to say that people do not target homes just because the way it looks, it's fancy, it looks expensive. You're driving nice cars. They're assuming you've got good, goodies in there. But if I've been in your house personally and I do know what you have in your house and I want to rob you, I'm going to learn everything I can about you, your habits, and what you do and don't do. So perhaps the killer is known to the girls, either by they've let the perpetrator in their house, they've ran their mouth about how they enter out of the house, doors locked, unlocked, or the perpetrator has a bullseye view of the glass sliders, second and third level. And it's also not to say the person could not have climbed up to the third slider and went in, because people tend to not lock balcony doors and glass doors on top floors, assuming no one will climb up to break in. But many perpetrators, such as rapists, have broken into homes and balconies and top porches because they were virile and could climb. We will never know until officials tell us, do the doors lock from the inside? Do they lock from the outside? And we heard that there was no breaking and entering So my better half would think either the killer had a code to get in the front door, was let in, or the sliders were not locked, either second or third. And that is how he made his entry into the house. Thank you all so much for joining me. How is this case going to be solved pertaining to the Idaho 4? I will now bring you commentary pertaining to that. Thank you for joining me. Law and Crime was source number one. Please check out my earlier live pertaining to social media. Can you live without social media and the internet? Ted Williams. This is what law enforcement needs to solve. Idaho murder case. Fox News is the source. Thank you for joining me.
It's been more than 6 weeks now since the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. And despite police still having no suspect, the father of victim Maddie Mogen remains hopeful that they will catch the killer. Ben Mogen telling a local newspaper, quote, "From the very beginning, I've known that people don't get away with these things these days. There's too many things that you can get caught up on, like DNA and videos everywhere. This isn't something that people get away with that goes unsolved." Ted Williams joins us now. He's a former DC homicide detective and a Fox News contributor and someone who spent a good deal of time since these murders in Idaho. And Ted, I have a really simple question. Given your experience, given that you've been there and watched these investigators at work, how on earth is it possible that we don't even have a suspect?
Well, you know, Jonathan, at this stage of the investigation, we really don't know what they have behind the scene. We know what they're telling the public. We know that they have elicited the public's help in trying to bring the killer or killers to justice. You've got thousands of law enforcement officers working behind the scene with evidence that hopefully, as Ben has said, will bring the killer or killers to justice, I believe.
Ted, we are all grateful always for the work that all of our police officers do. But is there any sense in your mind or any fear in your mind that there is a level of, I don't want to say incompetence, but level of perhaps inexperience with these kind of cases in this sort of smaller police force?
Well, you know, Jonathan, when I heard that the 35-person police department who had not had a homicide out there in about 7 years was the lead in this, I was deeply concerned. But now I do realize that you have the FBI and you have the Idaho State Police force that are working in conjunction with that local police department. And so you do have now a great deal of experience. I was deeply concerned, as perhaps you know, about them putting the white car out there so late. I think that a case of this nature, you need the public's help in solving this crime. Somebody, Jonathan, somebody out there have seen that white car. Somebody out there knows of someone who came home with a...
Let me interject here about the state police and FBI being involved. Many times in the chat and on these news channels, people will comment what they should do, what they should do. I think by now, wherever or whenever Moscow didn't do something appropriately in the beginning, let's say the beginning, first few days, the police, state police, and the FBI picked up the slack. So all the questions that people keep asking over and over again, I think you should know by now, they have assessed anybody that has been friends with the kids, fell out with the kids, people who own the property, people who have gone and done work for the property, anybody that brings delivery service to the property, neighbors, boyfriends, ex-boyfriends, anybody they've dated, anybody in their phone contacts, anybody they've texted, anybody that texted them, anybody that sent the message through Messenger, TikTok, IG. Common sense would be they are looking at all of those people that have contacted all 4 victims, anybody that they contacted, wherever they went and hung out, they would have talked to all those people. And the point is, whether they tell us they are cleared or not, it does not mean it is the truth, and it does not mean that they cannot go back and speak to the person. I would also hope that they have looked at everyone's physical body underneath his or her clothing, looked at everybody's hands, stomach, arms, neck, face, chest, to see if they have any type of scratch marks, cut marks, any type of wounds, to where maybe they would be somebody fighting them back or they fell down in a struggle. Because I am definitely assuming Ethan, being a big guy, struggled and fought with the killer. So that leads me to also ask, what is the size of the killer? And it's not to say that a average height guy, 5'7", 5'8", couldn't take down a 6-foot person. Because as you see, Ethan was at least that taller, and he is no longer alive. But all the questions that people continue to ask, common sense should tell you by now, they have already assessed those questions. The who, the where, the why, the when, all parties that know the victims, all parties that cross their paths, any names given in a tips. They're vetting all those names. 250 people from a week or so ago, 9 times out of 10, that number is greater by the minute. So I do have faith in law enforcement that they are talking to everyone, watching everyone, checking all devices of everyone known to the victims, past and present, watching all social media accounts of those commenting that know of the victims, speak of the victims, and if they need to get a search warrant for anybody's devices, they can do it. So I'm not even worried, because that is the FBI's job. The vetting process, data gathering, surveillance, putting out devices to gather information such as cameras, audio equipment. That is the FBI's job. So I have faith that they are doing all of that. And if need be, if they have to watch someone's house, work, job, they are. Let's continue this information about Fox News. Thank you for joining me.
Someone who came home with a wound. Somebody out there knows of someone who came home with a great deal of bloody clothes. And all law enforcement need is just that one person to come forward and help them in resolving this matter.
Yeah, and Ted, this doesn't appear on the face of it, at least to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the kind of crime that is committed by criminal masterminds. Surely there was a lot of DNA evidence left there. This car that you've talked about, why are they deliberately withholding a lot of information? Is that what you think is going on here?
Well, they're deliberately holding back some information. I don't know how much, but I do know that having been out there in Idaho, having been out there and walked the circumference of that crime scene, I believe from everything that I've seen and gleaned that the person or persons who committed this crime had been in that home before. And I do believe that there was a great deal of evidence that was left and that law enforcement is processing that evidence at some stage here. And I'm hoping soon that definitely they will resolve and solve this case. A crime scene cries out to investigators, and good investigators listen to the crime scene and what it gives them. And here, I think you have a great deal of physical evidence. Someone will be caught in this, or someone's.
Yep, you really hope so for the sake of those families that we get answers soon. Ted, great to have you with us today. Thank you very much for your expertise and experience in sharing it with us. Julie.
Ted Williams, giving his expertise on this case. You hear him say that from the looks of the house, he believes the perpetrator has been to the house. He may be accurate. He may be accurate. And the sad thing about this case would be, if that is true, that the perpetrator has been in the home, knows the victims personally. They know the perpetrator or knew the perpetrator, and he broke protocol, code, and loyalty by killing them. Do not know if he knew them long, befriended them to get close to them to hurt them, felt rebuffed by them, one or two, whomever. But that would be the worst case scenario, is the perpetrator is known to the victims. Because that's more scary to people. Because in your mind, you'll say, well, I thought we knew him or her. I thought we knew them. But that's the point. You do not know people. You do not know that people seethe and loathe underneath, mumble under their breath, that they despise you and don't like you, don't care for you, maybe liked you at one time, but don't like you or care for you now, have found fault with you. The white car. At what point did they gather information, tip on the white car? Early on in the investigation, days into it, 1 week, 2 weeks, or the day that they release the information to the public? Naturally, they will not tell you when they got the information about the car, but it's out there now. So what is the relevance of the white Elantra? It's just a suspect's getaway car. Look out. Or just a car that was suspicious in the area. Person's acting suspicious. Or an eyewitness. And as I've told you before, when cars are being released to the public, it does not mean that they're actually a witness. Sometimes they are actually the perpetrator, and law enforcement has used that ruse that they're a witness to get people to talk and get information about the person or car, and or hope that the person would come in. And as you have seen, this person has not come forward to say, hi, my name is such and such, and I own a white Hyundai Elantra, and I was near the house, at the house, on the street, around the corner, or 2 blocks over, in that car on that fateful night, the 12th or 13th. Why is that? Where is the car? Where is the owner? What is the relevance to the car and the location of the crime scene? Who gave the tip? Why did they give the tip? And is it actually relevant to this case? And the fact that the Elantra is still on the table, one would just assume it has relevance. Thank you for joining me. That was Fox News. If you need verification for the information. Source number 3 is pertaining to speculation. Plural in this case. The chief has spoken on that. People acting as if they know who committed the crime. People intervening in the crime, wanting 5 minutes of fame to give commentary. As you heard in the first source I brought you, why are so many people intervening, wanting to speak about noise in the house, creaky floors, what you can hear, can't hear, who should have heard something, who all's been in the house, did the perpetrator lie in wait, were they already in the house, who's the suspect, who has a motive? You don't know who has a motive. Because really there's no motive to bludgeon 4 people to death unless you are being in a situation where you are fighting for your own safety. So one would use common sense to assume that these 4 people weren't attacking someone for that person to kill all 4 people in this house. Because wouldn't the person come forward to say, hey, I had an altercation These 4 people jumped me. They tried to beat me up, hurt me, and I stabbed all of them to death. There is a motive, but it doesn't mean the motive makes any logical sense or is right. But to the killer, it is. And as I said before, if you can kill the 4, you can kill 4 more. The motive will not matter. You also heard an earlier commentary about the use of the knife, it being personal. Well, there are many cases of bludgeonings where the perpetrator did not know the victim. The victim did not know the perpetrator. There have been many people stabbed because that was the use of weapon that the perpetrator chose. There are many people who like knives. Frankly, I can speak from family members that I know. They like knives. They don't grab a gun. They don't go get a gun. They will cut you first before shooting you. So is it perhaps the perpetrator is a knife aficionado? He likes knives, doesn't care for guns. Was the knife used only because it wouldn't make a lot of noise, such as a gun? What was heard in the house that fateful morning? Has everything been told the truth pertaining to that morning to law officials by the surviving roommates? And once again, just because a person was stabbed does not mean the perpetrator knew the victim. Maybe that was just a choice he wanted to use to kill these people. Is he known to always carry a knife? The issue that he's experienced with the knife, is he or is he not? Has he used it to carve animals, fishing, hunting, military, or once again, just someone who likes knives, or someone who just went to get a knife for this occasion? Did that ever occur to any of you? Debunk all theories of hunters, previous serial killer, murderer, knife aficionado. Somebody just had an issue with these kids, or one of them was a target, 2, 3, whichever. And on this fateful night, he went and bought a knife just to kill these kids. Not a knife enthusiast, not military, not has skinned any animals, not a hunter, not a fisherman, not a wildlife person. Somebody who just had a problem with one of these kids, planned this day before, 2 days before, a month before, and just bought a knife and used it in the killings. Which is it? Fox 10 Phoenix is my third source. Police warn against speculation as the investigation continues. Thank you for joining me.
Weeks now since they were killed, and without many new leads, police are warning against speculation. Fox's Stephen Goen has more from Moscow.
Police say controlling misinformation has been one of the most frustrating parts of their investigation. Now, certain rumors on the internet have led to lawsuits. Over the weekend, as people gathered for the Christmas holiday, a University of Idaho professor filed a defamation suit against Ashley Guillard, a TikTok user who accused the professor of playing a role in the murders. Attorneys for the professor say Guillard's claims are false and that this professor never met the 4 students or had them in a class. Now, Guillard has responded to the lawsuit and says she won't stop posting videos, but in a statement, the University of Idaho spoke out against the videos, saying they, quote, don't condone the spreading of false information. It's one of the most high-profile examples of online speculation that local police have urged the public to avoid from the very start of their investigation. Here's what Moscow Police Chief James Fry had to say about rumors in the weeks leading up to Christmas.
We find ourselves not only tracking those rumors down and trying to quell them, but also we see our tips that come in are geared more toward the rumor, not the facts that have been put out. In many ways, it just re-victimizes folks who have already suffered this terrible trauma.
And Chief Fry says some rumors have even led to death threats against the families of the victims. As of today, there's been no suspect publicly identified. Police say they've received about 12,000 tips so far. In Moscow, Stephen Gowen, Fox 10 News.
All right, Fox 10 Phoenix is the source. Well, so far I've heard 17,000 tips. And as you hear from the captain, rumors are not helpful because you're wasting their time by calling in rumors to the police and or the email or the FBI. They're taking down this information, going out hunting down he said, she said. You're just watching from your comfortable home, cell phone, car, wherever you are, spewing out this nonsense and expecting someone to believe what you're saying when, one, you do not know the victims, you don't know the perpetrator, you've never been to Moscow, Idaho, you don't know anyone in Moscow, Idaho, you don't even know the people that know the victims. And it's cruel. And as they say, re-victimization. You're showing disrespect to the dead. You're showing disrespect to the family members. You're showing disrespect to innocent people who may have nothing to do with the crime, have no knowledge of the crime. Yes, speculations is normal because we are human. We are flawed. We will assume the worst of man, woman. But it does not mean it is the truth. Because someone is missing, such as a woman, does not mean her boyfriend did something to her or her husband. You only think that if you've heard derogatory things pertaining to their relationship. She was beat. She was abused. He's been to jail for hurting her. She had a restraining order against him. He has a penchant for beating up women. So then your mind will start to go into rotation. Well, he's a likely possible suspect, but it doesn't mean that he did it. It's an assumption that he did it. You have to have proof. And that is how law enforcement works. We can't arrest somebody on a rumor or an assumption that he or she did it. They're the likely candidate. We have to have evidence. We have to go before a grand jury to seal an indictment. 12 people have to vote on that in order for it to bring forth a charge, then go to trial. And you see, it's these little things that people do not consider when they throw daggers at who they think the killer is. Any misgivings in an arrest of a person can be thrown out once they go to court if things are not done properly. This is why you don't have arrests soon in a case. They may actually have something circumstantial, but that does not always mean that the person is the perpetrator. Sometimes that's all you have. They didn't leave behind any evidence. There was no CCTV footage, no video surveillance, no text messaging, no GPS to put them at the scene, near the scene. But circumstantial. They've got bad blood between one another. Somebody's heard the person threaten the other person, but you have nothing. So you have to work the case and work around, and you have to use damn near deviant behavior to get the suspect. That is true. Even the police has to get a little gritty, grimy in detective work to get the killer. Because sometimes a person looks guilty, sounds guilty, but that's not enough for a charge. And just because somebody broke up with somebody does not mean they killed somebody. Because let's be truthful. People break up every day and their ex does not murder them. They do not hire somebody to kill them. Because if that's the case, there will be a lot of dead people. Because people break up with people all the time. Some people break up every other week, every other month. So then that scenario would be like resurrecting the dead. Someone got killed because their boyfriend broke up with him or vice versa. He killed her. Then what? TikToker being sued. She's going to continue on the rant that this white lady conspired with another male to kill Kaylee Gonsalves. Cruel and ridiculous. And I think this case was meant to be to show us why you can't publicly say who you think killed somebody. Because imagine you say this on a platform such as YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and next thing you know, somebody's trying to find you to serve you a cease and desist order to be quiet. I believe this is a lesson learned for all of us, especially those who have public platforms such as YouTubers, that you're going to have to tread lightly in your commentary pertaining to accusing people of murder. I have done it myself, believed that some people killed a person or child or have knowledge thereof, and they could have easily done the same to me. And that's the whole point of social platforms. It is up to the person to decide which platform they would want to sue pertaining to the information and the accusations. And I think the only reason why some people have a problem with this information is because it's a woman being accused of killing another woman and also having an affair with a younger woman. So to some, it may be outlandish, preposterous, but we do know that women do sleep with other women. It's not to say that this accusation is true, but it's just too far-fetched because some of you just want to ride on the Jack Decor train. And some of you have beat the jacks of all trades down. As I've said on my community page, you have beaten the horse down. And it's been resurrected because you won't stop talking about this boy, the hoodie guy. And you've gone from Jack and Jeremy and the new guy, neighbor. Where else can you take the accusations and the narrative? You don't know these kids. You don't know anything about them. You don't know anything about what happened that night. If anybody had an altercation with somebody, if indeed somebody had a stalker, if indeed all targets were the three girls. Any type of noise complaints that jumped off to this event? A voyeur, neighbor peeping through curtains and blinds, telescope, binoculars? Somebody said something out of the way. Did somebody hurt their feelings? They've been holding a grudge. I've heard one expert say that. How do you know this isn't something from a long time ago? Didn't have to happen that night or at a bar or a grub bus. Who's to say somebody's just been walking around bent out of shape over something one of these girls said or did? You don't know because you don't know the girls. You don't know them. And people are murdered by people every day that don't know them. Yes, high cases of people being known to the victims, but there are also many cases of carjackings, murders, home break-in, home invasions where they do kill the people in the house, the business. They don't know them. It was a crime of opportunity. Many people walk outside their door and are murdered or beat up, purse stolen, wallet stolen, jewelry stolen. They do not know the perpetrator. Perpetrator do not know them. It's just an easy target. And that's the point of life. Many people are targeted because of what they have. Nice car, nice home, nice jewelry, nice handbag. Assuming you got a wallet full of money, jewelry, debit cards. They're not going to know until they find out. Baffling case this is. But as the one man said in the commentary on Law and Crime, only bizarre to some of you who don't live in a crime-ridden area, city. Crime happens every day. People are stabbed every day. You just didn't hear of it in Moscow. But there are people who are bludgeoned every day, people who have been stabbed and actually live. Stabbed numerous times. I believe I heard that recently. A woman stabbed at least 30-something times and she survived. Maybe she was not stabbed with the same knife or ferocity, but she lived. to tell the story. So there are people who are stabbed and actually survive. People stabbed by people that did not know them. People are killed every day by people who do not know them. And that's the gist of this story. We do not know who the perpetrator is. Now, is there a profile of the killer? Do the police have an idea of a suspect and even a possible motive? And they're not saying anything as not to alert the killer. Because let's be truthful. If it is indeed a personal person that knows the victims, it probably would not be a good idea to say, we believe this certain person did it, but we're just gathering evidence. That's not good, because you're still dealing with a loose cannon, and you do not want that person just walking around because they may decide to do it again. I'm praying for a resolution to this case. I'm praying for a resolution soon. I'm praying that they do have a suspect in mind. I'm praying that they know something about the suspect. They know where to find the suspect, but they're needing evidence to tie him or they to the crime. Because if indeed the perpetrator was suited up, did wear gloves, did not cut himself, then they've got to have something to put him at the crime scene, such as doorbell camera surveillance. I do not know if the kids had any type of surveillance in their rooms, but I'm praying that somebody saw something of a figure go up to this house, because that's another issue. We do not know how the perpetrator entered the house, but perhaps police do know. Entry point, exit point, who was stabbed first, who was stabbed last, because naturally it's bloody. He would have left a trail. So 9 times out of 10, they have a pretty good idea of who was hurt first, because the trail is going to tell on itself from the moment the person walked in which direction he or she went in. So I think they probably have a general idea of who was stabbed first, who was stabbed last. The exit point. So how did the perpetrator enter into the house? How did he exit out of the house? Did he use the front door? Had a code? Invited in? Brought in? Did he enter through the second door slider or the third level? There was also a screen laying outside in many photo stills and videos of this house. Who took that screen off of the window of the second floor entry? It would be a window to the right of the glass slider. Did the perpetrator take that screen off a window? Because if the girls used the front entry going and coming, perhaps all sliders were locked, and he took the screen off that window and entered through a window. Did all of the windows open it? Could you open the windows from the inside? Did they have all of their windows locked? If he couldn't got in through windows and doors, did he climb to the third floor slider, porch, enter up that way? So see, these are the questions you have to ask. We don't have the answers because police, they're not telling us anything pertaining to doors, windows, and glass sliders. But what would be sad to know is that the girls from the second and third floor entered the back way in and out of the property and left the glass slider unlocked every time they left. That would have been very dangerous, because you cannot assume a person would not try the glass door to see if it would open or close, because that is an assumption. Nobody can see the glass door from the front of the building. We'll just leave it unlocked. But as I've shown you in my video the other day, you have a bullseye view from the corner of the street of the back of the house and the porches. So if a person became a voyeur watching the girls from any vantage point, he or she could have walked up to the house, walked to the back of there on this fateful morning, and tried to see if the door would open. The glass slider on the second level. And maybe it did. Imagine that. The girls let their killer in unknowingly. But then you'd have to ask this question. Did he go to the sliders and they were left unlocked and made his way in and lied in wait? Or, a better half says, when they came home, wouldn't they have locked the slider door, whether they entered it or not? Because it's night and they're going to bed. See, you have to ask all the questions. Why would they leave it unlocked and it's nighttime and they're secure in the house? And if they entered that way and left it unlocked on their outing, wouldn't they lock the slider once inside? So that's the one thing nobody's asked either. Listen at me very carefully now. Why would they be in the house with the slider unlocked on the second level, knowing they have to go to sleep? Because everyone that I watch commentary focuses on the slider as the entry point, second level, but use deduction. Why would they leave it unlocked once in? Wouldn't they lock the glass door? So what it's going to come down to are the temperaments of the girls. Did they normally lock the slider? Number one. Second and third floor. Number two. Was the slider on the second level able to be locked from the inside? Was it able to be locked from the inside? Because most of us are believing you can't lock it from the outside. I don't know. I can't say. But did they lock it when they got home? Which entry did they exit out of when they left for the day? Glass slider or front entry? And why would you leave it unlocked once home? Do they normally lock it even when they're in the house? See? Because this is why I said you can't assume anything, because you don't know the victims. You don't know their temperaments. You don't know their schedules. You don't know their habits. And they're just some people that just don't lock doors, don't lock windows any season. And that would be the ultimate betrayal to the spirit, is to know these girls never locked any doors in the bedrooms, never locked the glass sliders, second and third floor, never got any doors or locks fixed that were a problem, and or gave out the code to the front door or invited their killer inside of the home, not knowing he was planning their demise. And the flip side is that they invited the killer in, as I said, and he did not favor them. He planned it, or he turned on them due to an argument or altercation and just went ham on everybody in the house, or the others heard the altercation. Someone mentioned that, and I thought, well, anything is possible. I want to thank you for joining me. Prayers to the families. I'm glad Mr. Mogen has spoken out, that he has faith that this case will be solved due to video surveillance and evidence. I'm glad he spoke, because it was time for somebody else to speak on behalf of their child. And I'm glad he spoke. And I also have faith in the judicial system and the process that the killer will be caught and justice will be served for the 4 victims. And I pray that things can go back to normal back in Moscow. But each person needs to know that the mind is demented and that at any moment a person can turn on you. So you still need to use protocol in going about your business, traveling, telling your personal business, what you're posting on social media, keeping all your doors and windows locked, not giving out spare keys to people you do not know you just met, giving out keypad locks and or codes. You need to guard your safety because you do not know people. And whether the killer is known to the victims or not, you still need to use appropriate protocol in dealing with people, sharing personal information, getting into cars with strangers, putting strangers in your cars, inviting strangers to your house, dating people, hooking up with people, seeing a side that is not proper, any type of violence, physical, verbal, you need to run like hell because that is deception. They was just playing. They were just joking. He didn't mean it. He apologized. She apologized. Just run like hell. Don't be a victim. Don't ever assume a person won't turn on you. Won't turn on you again. Won't kill you. Sometimes it's best to not have faith in people when they're showing you signs they are not right. Don't sit around and wait to see if they'll wig out the next time and go all the way. Be very careful of your surroundings and the company that you keep. Because in this case, it has not been told if law enforcement believes that the killer is known to the victims, but nonetheless, a brutal crime, plural, transpired in this house. So you just need to be aware of all the people that you deal with, whether you know them or not. And if anything seems suspicious to you in nature by a person's behavior, try to remove yourself carefully from the room, car, as to preserve your life. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $Beganji129 Cash App. Thank you so much for your time. Happy holidays to everyone. Happy New Year to the viewing audience. Please be safe and please stay warm. You have been listening to The Vault. Thank you.